As you can see, I'm about to be struck down by my enemy. Now, instinctively, what button would you press? Of course, any prior knowledge of this game might actually subdue your instincts, causing you to apply intellect, but try to resist that if you can. Concentrate. What are your instincts telling you? There are so many facets that go into creating a truly engaging and well-balanced combat system. Considering how much pain we inflict or how much suffering we can take is just the tip of the iceberg. For a game's combat to genuinely wow its audience, there's one surefire way to do it. Innovate. I'm saying that so matter-of-factly as if innovation can be applied as readily as a health bar, but at the end of the day, innovation is what drives the industry forward. The irony is though, innovation breeds replication, which creates repetition, eventually leading to stagnation. Each of which I believe can be considered as a stage in the lifespan of a successful gaming mechanic. This is actually something I touched on very briefly in my previous video. The replication of well-crafted mechanics is fraught with the risk of being labelled as unoriginal. And as the mechanic perpetuates across the industry, the degree of originality grows exponentially. In 2011, we saw the start of a monumental shift towards games replicating the mechanics established in Dark Souls. A game that effectively opened the door for all developers, providing them with access to the backbone of a solid and engaging combat system, leaving behind any need for innovation. The risk factor of being labelled as unoriginal when creating a Souls-like might be high, but that's a risk that can be countered, or at the very least mitigated, by producing a very high quality game. I would usually describe the games industry as fickle, but it's probably more accurate to call it revenue focused. Casting aside gameplay formulas that don't necessarily prove lucrative is in all fairness a pretty sound business practice. Deck 13 would be the first developers to test the staying power of the Souls-like formula as they released the widely considered utterly unremarkable Lords of the Fallen in 2014. Its gameplay is unapologetically reminiscent of Dark Souls, with plenty of challenging stamina-based combat and an overly oppressive atmosphere, but quite frankly it falls massively short. The attempt to emulate the heavy armour and slow committed actions of Dark Souls is commendable, but what we end up with is movement that feels incredibly taxing as it takes half an age for any attack to connect. But credit where credit is due, Deck 13 doubled down on the formula. After applying what they had learned from Lords of the Fallen, and most likely from Software's Dark Souls 2 and Bloodborne, they released The Surge in 2017 to a far more positive reception. I can't claim to offer much insight into the game myself as I've barely played it, but what it did demonstrate is that players were keen to explore more worlds outside of From Software's making, as long as it carried with it the Souls-like exploration, Souls-like combat, and of course the Souls-like challenge. With the now established magic A plus B plus C ingredients, it didn't take long for developers to adopt, borrow and copy what they knew to be successful and reproduce the formula for their own projects. But I've noticed 14 years after the launch of Dark Souls that we've reached a stage in gaming culture where each new announcement identified as a Souls-like is tarnished with a slew of disparaging remarks. It may have taken a little longer than usual, but I believe that we have begun to see the results of years and years of replication. But wait, we have seen innovation from, well, you can probably guess. The answer that you gave to my earlier question is, I imagine, indicative of the types of games that you like to play, and of course whichever button you chose to press, there were no wrong answers. Muscle memory is a powerful thing, and if you were asked this question a month from now, there's a good chance that your latest gaming obsession would shape your response. That said, I can still say with no small measure of confidence that the button you gravitated towards was L1. Other console variations of course also apply. My backup answer is that you would have pressed circle, but I'd argue that we left it a little too late for any evasive maneuvers anyway. I'm drawing attention to this not as an attempt to cast aspersions towards standardized button mapping, although there are definitely things to be said about it. My ambition is to reinforce just how much Dark Souls has influenced gaming culture. I think most of you would resort to L1 as an input for defense. I also think most of you didn't even question my logic when I casually pointed out that circle would be the input for evasion. The resulting actions to these inputs are something of an expectation to many of us. It's pretty much second nature. In 2019, From Software would take their very well established 8-year-old proven track record powerhouse of a formula and alter it to fit the mold of a brand new IP. Sekiro Shadows Die Twice released offering a rejuvenated look at the aging Souls-like structure. Perhaps what was most apparent was their new take on the already highly popular combat. At its core, Sekiro's combat is dictated by its posture system. This is effectively just another dynamic stat meter to manage as the intensity of combat ebbs and flows. Bearing virtually no resemblance to the now absent stamina meter, posture increases rapidly when holding down L1 as a defense. Eventually the posture meter will break, leaving the player vulnerable to attacks. The only way to circumvent this vulnerability is to time defense inputs with the attacks from the enemy. Now, that last part is crucial. Tapping L1 at the precise moment an enemy attack lands results in a deflection. The combat in Sekiro is rooted in this very specific mechanic, and it of course expands on the intense challenge of high risk, high reward dynamic that the Souls series is famous for. There are a dozen and one more features that Sekiro introduced to help distance itself from being labelled as just another Souls-like, while trying its best not to alienate the existing From Software fanbase. It's no understatement to describe Sekiro's combat as impeccable. Undoubtedly a prime candidate for exploitation, and if not used sparingly, could easily lead to repetition. I would hedge my bets that many who played Sekiro at release immediately began brainstorming buzzwords that could be assigned to the next game that shared its combat mechanics. The first Seki-like that we saw, that really doesn't roll off the tongue, does it, was Respawn Entertainment's Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order in 2019. A fantastic game on its own merits regardless of the Star Wars IP that backs it up. The game shows off an excellent narrative, beautiful locations, and of course, the Sekiro reminiscent combat. The satisfying clash of blades in Sekiro when hitting L1 for a perfect deflect translates wonderfully to the crack and buzz of a lightsaber. But it's perhaps a little unfair to claim that Respawn copied Sekiro's combat. Both games released only 8 months apart, meaning that surely Fallen Order's development cycle would have seen to it that the combat mechanics were already established by the time Sekiro launched. From the research that I did on the matter, Respawn merely took Sekiro's exceedingly positive reception as a sign that they were on the right path. Now, if someone were to believe that the combat in Fallen Order wasn't snappy enough, or they were ludicrous to think that Sekiro somehow felt sluggish, I would point them in the direction of Sifu, a game that completely surpassed all my expectations. The developers Slowclap released Sifu in 2022, delivering what I would describe as the most electrifying combat I've experienced since Sekiro. Sifu delivered the intense challenge of a Sek-like, that doesn't sound right either, and it required absolute precision when tapping L1 to deflect any incoming attacks. We also saw the return of the careful management of a posture system to avoid being left defenseless. Now, despite this clear replication, at no point did Sifu ever feel like it was lacking originality. The game's structure follows that of a roguelite, helping differentiate itself from any conventional Sekiro-like or Souls-like comparisons. But there is no mistaking where the posture and deflection mechanics came from. But recognition should be given where it belongs, and Sifu delivers the best version of evasion mechanics I've seen for years. It reminds me of the feeling I would get from playing Fight Night Round 3 as a teenager. Slipping a lightning fast combo only to follow it up with blinding counterpunches never felt so good. With now 3 games that have found success from this combat system, well 4 if we count Jedi Survivor, well 5 if we count Wolong, 6 if we count Lies of P, 7 if we count Ghost of Tsushima, 8 if we count Amnesia. Meanwhile, the more traditional Souls-likes are still going strong, with near countless imitations released every year. We've even reached a point where developers are having to explicitly deny rumours that their upcoming game is a Souls-like. In all fairness, some publications are intent on making matters worse. Even something as far removed from the genre as Dynasty Warriors has received articles comparing it to Souls games. If you are sick and tired of Souls-likes, I'm sorry to say that the industry's revenue-focused nature means that they're probably going to bleed the formula dry. As far as shareholders are concerned, why replace the mechanics that are proven to work? And if there was ever any doubt, Elden Ring has certainly re-solidified the Souls-like approach as a winning formula, likely leading to publishers and developers to utilise this for many years to come. Once again, I want to point out that it's hard to blame them for applying this rationale. They are businesses after all, and their aim is to make money. Unfortunately, while they continue to rinse overused mechanics and seek remuneration, we'll have to make do with what we're given until we're facing industry stagnation. For now, it feels like each and every combat encounter, regardless of the game that we're playing, carries with it a certain level of expectation. L1 to deflect or block, circle to dodge or evade, either posture or stamina to manage, the list goes on. Of course, there are games out there that fight against this stagnation by resisting the urge to fit the mold that From Software pioneered, and I urge you to seek them out. They may seem few and far between, but that lends itself perfectly to avoiding the risk of repetition. Besides, when the market is saturated with Souls-likes, the games that deviate from the norm can often be elevated for not bending to the success of replication. Honestly, who knows how long the Souls-like formula will last? Maybe one of these days a new game will capture the hearts of the players, offering that one thing that the industry so desperately needs.